to do a conflicts check. Everyone in my office, me, the people on the team, do we know the officer who's being investigated? Do we have any connection to it? The chain of command, this is important. The shooting response team that I mentioned, that specialized group, does not report to the state police. They do not. It's probably the only area where the state police has people working on anything where they do not report to Colonel Fuentes or up the line. They report to the Attorney General's office. They report to me and to the Attorney General himself. And that's important because we need to have a layer of separation there built in for state police. Okay, same standards I talked about before. At the end of a shooting response team investigation, we have a presumption that the case will go into a grand jury unless the undisputed facts indicate that the use of force was justifiable under the law. Same standard as in the municipal cases that I discussed before. Now, grand jury, I want to take a little poll here for a second. How many people understand, yourselves, and I guess I would say your congregants or parishioners generally, that grand juries are civilians chosen at random from the population? Because I believe, and I've asked this question before, I believe that a lot of citizens think that grand juries are either prosecutors or police officers or people specially chosen by prosecutors or police officers. How many people think that it's clearly understood among your people who you represent here today that grand juries are chosen absolutely at random? Just show of hands. How many people think that's well? Okay, so about 50-50, maybe a little more, 60-40 or so. Grand juries, the same way you get those irritating juries notices in your home, you get, has anyone here served on a grand jury? Okay. You get those grand jury notices, and grand jurors are chosen from random. People don't always understand that. That's number one. Grand jury is 23 civilians drawn at random from the public. The function is to hear evidence and determine whether to issue an indictment. An indictment, it's one of those words we hear all the time. An indictment is an official written accusation charging a person with a crime. The standard of proof, this is important. The standard of proof in a jury trial, everyone knows, right? Standard of proof, guilty what? Beyond a reasonable doubt, everyone knows. That is the highest standard of proof that our law recognizes. It's not certainty, but it's the closest thing to, scientific certainty that our law has. In the grand jury, the standard is much lower. It's probable cause. And probable cause people define a little bit differently, but I think generally speaking, people think it is more likely than not, 51%, I guess, if you had to quantify it. So it is a different standard in the grand jury. A little terminology that you hear sometimes, a true bill means a grand jury has issued an indictment, and no true bill means a grand jury has not issued an indictment. Now, in any case involving a police-involved shooting, you have to start in the grand jury by instructing them on the crime. You can't just go into a grand jury and say, today I'm going to be giving you evidence about a police-involved shooting that happened, and I'm going to give you justification, and then we'll talk about crime. You have to start with the crime. And keep in mind, with any police-involved shooting case, the crime that is going to be potentially on the table is going to be, if the person died, it's going to be murder. Murder, right? So when people say, I want this police officer charged, a lot of times you're talking about a charge of murder. And if the person didn't die, it's going to be attempted murder or aggravated assault. So you were talking about high-stakes crimes for these police officers. Now, any criminal charge in any case, police-involved shooting or any other case, bank robbery, whatever you have, is always subject to a defense that lawyers call justification, which is sort of what it sounds like, right? If you can prove that you were justified in what you did, legally justified, then you will be not guilty. Now, in police-involved shooting cases, there are three primary justification defenses. I won't read them for you, it's a little bit of legalese. They're on the law books in New Jersey. You can find them if you just Google New Jersey justification defenses. Excuse me. And I put the sites up there. Number one is self-defense. Every person in this room has the right to defend themselves to the extent reasonable, right? You can't, if someone pushes you, you can't kill them. But if you're, it's common sense to an extent. I mean, the legal definition says the actor can use only the amount or degree of force that he reasonably believes is necessary to protect himself against harm. If the actor is attempting to protect himself against exposure to death or substantial danger of serious bodily harm, he may resort to use of deadly force. Otherwise, he may resort only to non-deadly force. Same way everyone in this room has the right to self-defense, police officers have the right to self-defense. Second one is defense of others. Similar idea, same way anyone in this room can protect a spouse, a child, a stranger from being harmed with the same basic rules as self-defense. Police officers have that same right. The third one applies only to law enforcement, and it's actually quite narrow. It's a little bit, I will say it's a little bit strange the way it's set up. A police officer is allowed to use force when making arrests or attempting to make arrests only for certain crimes, which is very strange to me because very serious crimes: homicide, kidnapping, sexual assault, arson, robbery, burglary, etc. Police find themselves in difficult situations in all types of cases. It doesn't matter whether the underlying actor committed murder or something altogether. But anyway, this defense only applies if a police officer is trying to make an arrest for one of those very serious crimes, and there is an imminent threat of deadly force to himself or a third party, or the use of deadly force is necessary to stop the crime while it's happening, or the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent an escape. An escape doesn't mean running away from the police officer. An escape means escape from prison. So it's a very narrow exception, but it does apply. Now, once, this is important, we were talking about sort of the burden of proof. Once there is a case involving a justification defense, and any police-involved shooting is going to involve a justification defense, the burden shifts over to the prosecutor. So let's say I'm trying a police officer. Let's say we've charged a police officer with murder. He fired his gun in the course of his job, and he's now on trial. I'm the prosecutor. I have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the police officer was not justified in what he did. In other words, I have to disprove his justification defense beyond a reasonable doubt. So, that is a very, very high burden. You have to prove to a jury to a very high level of certainty that that police officer was not justified in what he did. It's not a 50-50 proposition. It's much, much higher than that. All right. A couple new things that we put in, and I've been referring to new things throughout. One of the new features is public statement. The practice of the counties used to vary. Some counties used to issue public statements, some didn't. The rule now is when a case is over, if a grand jury no bills a case, if a grand jury votes against indicting, or the decision is made not to present the case to a grand jury, the county prosecutor must now issue a public statement. Or if it's a state or county level case, we must issue, the Attorney General's office must issue a public statement. We've had maybe 15 of them since we put the rule in place. The idea here is transparency, and that is the point when the public will learn, here are the facts, or when somebody is charged. But if nobody is charged, we now require issuance of a public statement. They have to be on the internet. You can, if you want to see some, look at our website, Division of Criminal Justice. We issued one yesterday. Camden County has issued these statements. Cumberland County, Essex County, and we're in the process of pulling them all together. This is a very important step. I think it helps quite a bit for the public to ultimately know what happened and to know that they will know what happened. So that's one of the new features of our new policy. And lastly, I mentioned earlier, we formed advisory groups. It's the same people who contributed to forming this policy in the first place, and some new people. We have some academics, some people from Rutgers, from the Graduate School of Criminal Justice, who are studying some of these issues. So the book is not closed. We're still willing to adopt new policies as appropriate. And last is outreach. That's why we're all here today. Every county prosecutor is doing the same thing we're doing here today across the state between now and the end of the year. So I hope that helps everyone here understand. Like I said, my goal is for every person who attends these meetings, and hopefully you all will go out and explain this to your congregants and your parishioners, how the process works, because I find that goes an awful long way in building trust and communication between law enforcement and our communities. So let me just, oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble. All right, I want to take questions. Chief Wagner went ahead of me to the chiefs of police. He's going to tell them I'm going to be a little late. So go ahead. You can ask anything about these policies or whatever.
I would just ask, just state your name and your affiliation.
Okay, I wanted to give him first chance. You okay?
Well, no, my question is, my name is Charles Lamb.
Yes, sir.
Human Relations Commission. Can a member of law enforcement be indicted without a grand jury?
No. Nobody. No human being can be indicted without a grand jury.
And I'll give you the example was in Baltimore. I think the prosecutor in Baltimore actually indicted the officers without a grand jury, but that's no.
I'm not sure about how that works. Yeah, I don't know the exact procedures in Maryland and Baltimore, but in this state, there's only two ways to be charged in this state. One is by indictment by a grand jury, and the other one is what we call accusation, but that means the defendant has agreed to the charge, basically. You're not going to really have that in this situation. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to thank you for coming today. My name is Pastor Williams, Bethel AME Church. And I like the idea of trying to have an independent evaluation, making sure people don't have conflicts. Can you say something about the Civil Rights Division of the FBI and how you see their participation to ensure there are no conflicts within that region of jurisdiction?
You mean, yeah, the Civil Rights Division of Department of Justice?
Yes, or
Yeah.
the FBI.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We actually met with them down in DOJ a couple weeks ago, and I will tell you, they need to figure out what they want their role to be. They ask for information at times. I think that's perfectly appropriate. We'll provide them information when they ask for it. But they are still, Department of Justice is still in the process of figuring out and what cases are we going to come in on, and when, and how. And I was in a meeting in the main Justice Building on 7th Street in Washington, D.C. with, leaders of that division, and a bunch of attorneys general, including our attorney general, was with me. And one of the things that I said, what I would urge DOJ to do is you need to come up with some clarity, both for your own people and for us at the state level, as to what cases are you going to be getting involved in and what cases are you not going to be getting involved in. If you are going to get involved in a case, when? Because sometimes they'll call us after a case is done and say, hey, can we get your files on that case? And we'll say, sure. Sometimes they'll want to get involved earlier. That's a little trickier. And then what are you going to be investigating for? Because the FBI and Department of Justice can only charge federal statutes. We can charge state statutes. Any case involving police-involved shooting is going to involve charges of homicide and attempted murder and that kind of thing, and the state justifications I just showed. The federal charges there's no federal homicide charge. There's federal homicide charges if you commit a crime